The war ends and British Major Ivan Hurst, a major in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers (REME), was sent to Wolfsburg to sort out the bomb remnants of the Volkswagen factory. Hello, this is a story about a remarkable man, a British major in the British Army, Ivan Hurst, and how he saved the company. You could say that he really started the company. Volkswagen has manufactured over 180 million vehicles in its history. The VW Golf, they've made over 37 million cars. And in 1974, my father bought one of the first ever made. And quite remarkably, he bore no grudge because 30 years earlier, he had been a prisoner of war in Germany. He had been captured at Arnhem. He was one of the paratroopers in 1st Airborne and spent 9 months in a prisoner of war camp. 9 months later, the war ends and my father is released and he returns to the UK. And meanwhile, a British Major Ivan Hurst with the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, he was sent to Wolfsburg in Germany to sort out the bombed remnants of the Volkswagen factory for the British Army in the summer of 1945, where trusteeship of the Volkswagen works had recently been handed over to the British by the US troops following its allocation to the British occupation zone. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you can subscribe, it makes a big difference, and like, and please leave any comments down below. Hope you enjoyed it. Adolf Hitler conceived the idea of a very simple, affordable people's car, Volkswagen, for the German public and tasked Ferdinand Porsche with its design. He was the renowned Austrian engineer who led the design and development of the vehicle. 20 years later, a British Army officer, Ivan Hurst, would save it, but we're jumping the gun a little bit. So the Porsche design team developed the Type 1, incorporating features like a rear-mounted air-cooled engine and distinctive rounded shape. So between 1933 and the outbreak of World War II, in September 1939, only a handful of Volkswagen Beetle prototypes and pre-production models were produced. While prototypes were developed, mass production for the general public never did occur before the war. Several prototypes, the V1, V3, VW30 series, were built for testing, with 30 pre-production models manufactured by Daimler-Benz in 1937. The factory at Wolfsburg opened in 1938, but only a small number of KDF wagons, later known as the Beetle, were produced before production shifted to military vehicles in 1939 to 1945. The intended mass production for the public was cancelled, and none of the privately ordered cars were delivered to civilians. Germany used 15,000 slaves captured during the war effort to make military vehicles. German historians estimated that 80% of Volkswagen's wartime workforce was slave labour. In 1939, Henry Ford was making cars in Germany, but rapidly converted to supplying the Nazi military with trucks and vehicles, becoming a key part in the German war effort, using forced labour and producing components for V2 rockets. Despite the American ownership, and he was awarded a medal by Hitler for his efforts. On July 30th, 1938, on his 75th birthday, American Henry Ford was awarded the Grand Cross of the German Eagle by Nazi Germany. This was the highest honour the Nazi regime could bestow on a foreign citizen. The medal was presented to honour Ford for his humanitarian ideals and for his role in fostering anti-Semitic views which aligned with Nazi idealism. Hitler considered Ford an inspiration and the only American mentioned favourably in Mein Kampf. But that's another video. During the war, 1939 to 1945, VW and US-owned Ford contributed to the Nazi war effort, which killed 6 million Jews, 20 million Russians and a total of 100 million people all around the world. The war ends and British Major Ivan Hurst, a major in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, REME, was sent to Wolfsburg to sort out the bomb remnants of the Volkswagen factory for the British Army in the summer of 1945, where trusteeship of Volkswagen Works had recently been handed over to the British by US troops following its allocation to the British occupation zone. With his colleague Colonel Charles Radcliffe, Hurst arrived in Germany in mid-1945 as the British Army took control of the town of Wolfsburg, including the VW factory. Soviet ground forces had already visited the factory but were not interested in it. The US Army also visited and similarly showed no interest. Inspecting the factory with a view for it being used as a REME workshop, Hurst discovered that much of the machinery had survived the bombing. Debris covering parts of the factory, including a generator part, had been put there to disguise the fact that it was still operational, which was a mystery. Hurst also found that machinery and stock, including pre-war prototype Volkswagen, in outbuildings on the site. He realised that the factory could be used for producing new vehicles for the British occupation forces in Germany. Hurst ordered the prototype to be made operational and had it painted in army green and had it sent to the British headquarters in Germany. And I love this part, that they liked it so much they ordered 20,000 Volkswagen saloons placed on August 22nd, 1945. Can you imagine you're in charge of a bombed out factory in post-war Germany with an order for 20,000 cars? Can you imagine the logistics problems it caused? How do you produce one car? Well, you haven't even done that. It was produced for you, painted it green, and now you've got to deliver 20,000 cars. And it was also a problem for the British government, who had to fund the production, but it enabled Hurst to turn the ruined armaments factory into a functioning car plant. The start of production of the saloon was on December 27th, 1945, and it was a start and a visible sign of new beginnings. Despite immense problems finding food, housing for the workforce, inadequate transport facilities and shortage of material supplies, the Beetle began rolling off the line. Cars were put together with old stock, including components from the military Kuberwagen, until 1946, when the factory produced about 1,000 cars a month. Hurst improved the quality of the car and built up a network of dealers and service centres. In November 1945, Hurst started the first election of an employee representative known as the Works Council, and he became interested in another VW military vehicle, the four-wheel drive, the Commander Wagon, which he was confident had a commercial potential, in particular in the forestry industries of France and Canada. By the time the first cars were being exported to the Netherlands in 1947, Hurst had succeeded in establishing a flourishing business for which a German manager was now sought. Henrik Nordhoff, a former Opel manager, was the man the British found to steer the company through the post-war boom years, following the transfer to German ownership in October 1949. Dr. Manfred Grieger, head of Volkswagen Corporate History Department, said Major Hurst was the right man at the right time and the right place. And thanks to him, the factory, founded by the National Socialists, and it was initially scheduled by the British for dismantling, was able to enjoy a brand new beginning. So Ivan Hurst left Wolfsburg in August 1949 when his mission came to an end, and he subsequently assumed other roles on behalf of the British military government. The 1950s Volkswagen contributed to be part of the West Germany's economic miracle through mass production of the Beetle and the introduction of the Type 2 transporter minibus. VW expanded into Europe and North South America and around the world. By the early 1970s, the VW range looked dated, and as a young man, my friends considered the VW was a car that would get you where you want to go eventually, but it wouldn't be a very exciting ride and it would be a bit noisy. The Volkswagen bus transporter camper, known today, if you look it up on Wikipedia, it will tell you that the T2 model was the standard transporter throughout the 1970s. But in the UK, we had the Commer and the Bedford bus transporter. I know this as I drove many of them in the RAF during the 1970s. And if you ever see an old 50s, 60s, 70s film of traffic, you will see many of them much more likely than seeing the VW transporter camper as you would now on our streets. In the 1970s, the Beetles continued to be produced, and in 1972 became the largest selling car of all time. But the range of VW did look dated, and the company faced declining sales, so something had to be done. The Volkswagen Passat was introduced in 1973, looking a bit more like a modern family car in the era of water-cooled VWs. Volkswagen introduced the Golf in 1974 to succeed the Beetle, featuring front-wheel drive and a hatchback design, and my dad bought one long before it became a hot hatch. I remember him telling me as he sat in the driver's seat that his new red VW Golf had the internal side dimensions were wider than a Jaguar XJ6. Volkswagen Scirocco was also introduced in 1974. Now, VW bought NSU in the 1970s, but 10 years earlier, in the 60s, my dad also had an NSU Prince 4. It was £500 new, and this is a photo of me about age 10 sitting on the bonnet with my mum. Dad was in the woods relieving himself, otherwise we would not be sitting on the car if Dad was about. Between 1973 and 1976, sales for Volkswagen in America dropped due to part of competition from Japanese automakers. Production changes, VW began developing production facilities in the United States in the mid-1970s. Well, my channel's always about electric vehicles, so this is a bit of going off on a slight tangent, but Volkswagen's first all-electric new vehicle was built in 1972, the T2 transporter, known as the Electrobus, and it was developed in response to the 1970s oil crisis. It had a lead-acid battery and a 16 kilowatt electric motor, and they sold 120. In 1976 they made the electric Golf Mark I, a one-off prototype with a 27 horsepower motor and a 4-speed manual gearbox. In 1981 the Golf 1 City was designed for everyday use, but only 25 were ever built. 1985, the Golf 2 City, the first EV Volkswagen built for serious production, though it was primarily used by the power utilities. And in 1993, the Golf 3, a more advanced production module that could reach 80% charge in 1.5 hours, and featured regenerative braking, something I always find quite hard to say. It was in 2013 the e-Golf and the e-Up VW introduced EVs based on existing combustion platforms, such as the e-Up and the City Car and the e-Golf. The e-Up was so popular it was cancelled by Volkswagen, who said this was due to it being based on an older platform. Or was it really that profit margins were much lower than the polluting petrol and diesel cars? In 2015, the emissions scandal hit us. I'm not sure if VW have ever really recovered from that, but they do make some very nice looking EVs, I must admit. A lot smaller than Tesla. I'm not saying they look nicer, but they're smaller and they look pretty good. I like the look of them. But I'm not going back to card readers and apps. The Tesla supercharger network is so good. It knows who you are. You plug it in and then you go to the loo. Simple. 2019, the ID3 started production. and in 2020 the ID4, and 2022 ID Buzz and ID7, and by 2030 VW aims for 80% of its sales in Europe to be electric. And yet it was campaigning very hard for the EU to extend the production of ICE cars beyond 2035. Interesting. Hope you've enjoyed this and hope you can subscribe and like. I've got a little bit more to tell you. Thank you for getting this far. But the key role played by the British and the work of Ivan Hurst during his crucial period of the modern-day VW have become widely acknowledged through the publication of a biography of Ivan Hurst and the acknowledgement of the British era at Volkswagen. Since Major Hurst saved VW, they went on to produce over 180 million vehicles, including 21 million Beetles and 37 million Volkswagen Golfs. He died in March 2000 and is buried in Saddleworth Cemetery, near to where he was born. Since the year of his death, the Volkswagen Corporate History Department have annually awarded the Ivan Hurst Prize, named to honour two outstanding young scientists. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.